On a crisp autumn morning in downtown Cleveland, Officer Michael Richardson was completing his routine patrol when he noticed something unusual. A young boy, no more than 7 years old, was running down the sidewalk, tears streaming down his face. What caught the officer's attention wasn't just the boy's distress, but the way he was frantically looking over his shoulder as if being chased. The child's navy blue school uniform was slightly disheveled, and his backpack bounced wildly against his small frame as he ran. When he spotted the police cruiser, relief washed over his tear-stained face. He immediately changed direction and sprinted toward the vehicle, waving his arms desperately to get the officer's attention. Officer Richardson quickly pulled over, his instincts telling him something was seriously wrong. As he stepped out of his cruiser, the boy practically collapsed against him, his small hands gripping the officer's uniform. "Please help me," he sobbed, his voice trembling. "She's not my real mom. She's not my real mom." The words sent a chill down the officer's spine. In his 15 years on the force, he'd handled numerous cases involving children, but something about this boy's raw fear and desperation struck him differently. Behind them, a woman in her mid-30s was hurrying down the sidewalk, calling out to the boy. She appeared well-dressed and composed, nothing about her immediately suggesting anything suspicious. The officer gently placed his hands on the boy's shoulders, creating a protective barrier between him and the approaching woman. The child's body was shaking, and his grip on the officer's uniform tightened. The woman reached them, slightly out of breath, her face a mixture of concern and embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, officer," she began, her voice steady and apologetic. "He's been acting out lately. You know how children can be." She reached for the boy, but he shrank further behind Officer Richardson, his small frame practically disappearing behind the officer's legs. Something in the boy's reaction made Officer Richardson's trained instincts kick into high gear. He'd seen children throw tantrums, seen them act out against parents, but this felt different. The fear in the boy's eyes was real, and his words kept echoing in the officer's mind, "She's not my real mom." Making a split-second decision, Officer Richardson calmly requested backup and asked the woman for identification. As he maintained a professional demeanor, his mind raced through protocols and procedures. The woman's smile remained fixed, but something flickered in her eyes, a momentary flash of panic that wouldn't have been noticeable to an untrained observer. As another patrol car approached in the distance, the boy's grip on Officer Richardson's uniform loosened slightly, but he remained pressed against the officer's side. The morning sun cast long shadows on the sidewalk as a gentle breeze carried the sound of approaching sirens. What had started as a routine patrol was about to unravel into one of the most extraordinary cases of Officer Richardson's career. The truth that would emerge in the following hours would shake the entire community, reminding everyone that sometimes the most shocking revelations come from the desperate plea of a child who found the courage to run toward a police car on an ordinary autumn morning. As additional police units arrived at the scene, Officer Richardson noticed subtle changes in the woman's behavior. Her initially confident demeanor began to crack, like thin ice under pressure. She kept checking her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled through what appeared to be messages. Inside the second patrol car that arrived was Officer Chen, a specialist in cases involving minors. She approached the young boy with a gentle smile, kneeling to meet his eye level. The child, still clinging to Officer Richardson's uniform, watched her cautiously. Officer Chen pulled out a small stuffed dog from her patrol kit, a tool she often used to help frightened children feel more at ease. "Hey there, buddy," she said softly, holding out the stuffed animal. "This is Max. He helps kids feel braver when they're scared. Would you like to hold him?" The boy hesitated for a moment before reaching out to take the toy, his other hand still firmly gripping Officer Richardson's uniform. Meanwhile, dispatch had run the woman's ID through their database. The results were troubling. The address she provided didn't match any records, and there were inconsistencies in her documentation. When questioned about these discrepancies, she became increasingly agitated, her explanations growing more convoluted. "There must be some mistake in your system," she insisted, her voice rising slightly. "I've lived at that address for 5 years. I can show you pictures of us together on my phone." But when she opened her photo gallery, Officer Richardson noticed something odd. All the photos appeared to be recent, within the last few months at most. The boy, feeling safer with Max the stuffed dog in his arms, began to whisper to Officer Chen. His story came out in fragments, like pieces of a puzzle slowly coming together. He spoke of a different home, a different life, and most importantly, a different mother who had disappeared from his life 6 months ago. "My real mom has a butterfly tattoo on her hand," he said, his voice growing stronger. "She makes chocolate chip pancakes every Sunday, and she sings me the dinosaur song before bed." These small, specific details caught the officer's attention. Such precise memories couldn't be fabricated by a child this young. The woman, overhearing this, tried to interject with explanations about his overactive imagination, but her words were drowned out by the arrival of Detective Harris from the Special Victims Unit. The detective had brought something with him, a file containing recent missing persons reports involving children. As Detective Harris approached, the woman's composure completely crumbled. Her hand flew to her mouth, and she took several steps backward, nearly stumbling on the curb. The reaction didn't go unnoticed by the experienced officers present. The boy, still holding Max the stuffed dog, looked up at Officer Chen with eyes that held both fear and hope. "Can you help me find my real mom?" he asked, his voice small but clear. "She must be really worried about me." The morning had grown warmer, but a different kind of chill had settled over the scene. Officer Richardson, still standing protectively near the boy, watched as Detective Harris opened his file. The truth was about to emerge, and it would prove to be more complex and disturbing than any of them had initially imagined. The gathered officers exchanged knowing looks as Detective Harris began to speak. They'd seen cases like this before, but something about this one felt different. Perhaps it was the boy's extraordinary courage in running to them for help, or perhaps it was the growing realization that they were standing on the edge of uncovering something much bigger than a single missing child case. As the morning traffic continued to flow around their impromptu gathering on the sidewalk, none of them could have predicted the chain of events that was about to unfold, events that would lead them down a path revealing a story of loss, deception, and a mother's desperate search for her missing son. Detective Harris carefully laid out several photographs on the hood of his car, each one showing a smiling child with their family. The boy, still clutching Max the stuffed dog, peered at them cautiously. His small finger trembled as he pointed to one of the photos, a picture of a woman with dark curly hair and warm brown eyes, a distinctive butterfly tattoo visible on her right hand. "That's my real mom," he said, his voice growing stronger. "That's the picture from our kitchen." The officers watched as tears welled up in his eyes, but these were different from his earlier tears of fear. These were tears of recognition, of hope. The woman who had claimed to be his mother started backing away from the group, her designer handbag clutched tightly to her chest. Officer Richardson noticed her eyes darting between the patrol cars, calculating. Before she could make a move, 2 officers quietly positioned themselves to block any potential escape route. Detective Harris radioed for additional units while pulling up more information on his tablet. The boy's mother had filed a missing persons report exactly 6 months and 3 days ago in a suburb of Cincinnati. The case had gone cold despite extensive searches and media coverage. The detective's face softened as he looked at the boy, realizing this child had somehow managed to do what dozens of trained professionals couldn't. He'd found his way back to them. Meanwhile, Officer Chen had gotten the boy settled in her patrol car with Max and a juice box from her kit. As the child sipped his drink, more details of his story emerged. He described how the woman had approached him outside his school, claiming his mother had been in an accident and had sent her to pick him up. It was a story they'd heard before, a classic tactic that still worked despite constant warnings to children about strangers. She said Mom was hurt really bad, the boy recalled, his voice barely above a whisper. I was scared, so I went with her. But then we drove for a really long time, and she took my phone away. He hugged Max closer, finding comfort in the stuffed animal's presence. She made me call her mom, but she never sang the dinosaur song right. Back at the scene, Detective Harris was quietly explaining to his colleagues what they'd discovered. The woman's real identity was beginning to emerge through database searches. She wasn't just any random kidnapper, she was connected to a series of similar incidents across 3 states. The careful planning, the detailed backstory, the well-maintained appearance, it all fit a pattern they'd seen before. The woman's facade had completely crumbled by now. Seated in the back of a patrol car, she stared straight ahead, refusing to answer any questions. The designer handbag she'd been clutching was found to contain multiple IDs with different names, and several prepaid phones, tools of someone who had done this before. As the morning wore on, a new sound cut through the tension, rapidly approaching vehicles with sirens blaring. But these weren't more police units. Detective Harris had made a very special call, and now, after 6 long months of searching, a mother was racing toward her son. The boy, still sitting in Officer Chen's patrol car, perked up at the sound. Something in those sirens seemed different to him, familiar somehow. Officer Chen watched through the rearview mirror as his expression changed from curiosity to growing excitement. He pressed his small hands against the window, his breath fogging the glass. Around the corner came 2 police escorts, lights flashing, followed by a civilian car driving at carefully controlled speed. As the vehicle pulled up, time seemed to slow down. The boy's eyes grew wide as he recognized the butterfly tattoo on the hand of the woman emerging from the car. His journey was about to come full circle, but the story was far from over. The moment seemed to stretch into infinity as the car door opened. The boy's mother stepped out, her hands shaking, her eyes immediately scanning the scene until they locked onto Officer Chen's patrol car. 6 months of sleepless nights, endless searches, and desperate prayers had led to this moment. Officer Chen carefully opened the back door of her patrol car, and the boy burst out like a ray of sunshine breaking through storm clouds. Still clutching Max the stuffed dog, he ran toward his mother, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground. Mom! Mom! His voice carried across the parking lot, filled with 6 months' worth of stored-up love and longing. His mother dropped to her knees, arms wide open, as her son crashed into her embrace. The butterfly tattoo on her hand seemed to dance as she wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close as if she might never let go again. Their sobs of joy merged together, creating a symphony of reunion that brought tears to the eyes of even the most seasoned officers present. "My baby, my precious baby," she whispered between kisses to his forehead, her hands gently touching his face as if to make sure he was real. The boy touched the butterfly tattoo on her hand, a gesture that seemed to carry special meaning between them. "I knew you'd find me, Mom," he said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "I remembered everything you taught me about being brave." Detective Harris watched the scene unfold while speaking quietly into his radio. This case was bigger than just one missing child. The woman in custody was potentially connected to other disappearances. In the patrol car, she sat silently, but her eyes were fixed on the reunion taking place, her expression unreadable. The boy's mother hadn't stopped crying, but these were healing tears, washing away months of fear and uncertainty. She looked up at Officer Chen, still holding her son tight. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you all for bringing him back to me." Officer Richardson approached them carefully, not wanting to intrude on their moment but needing to gather more information. The boy's mother nodded, understanding the necessity, though she kept one arm firmly around her son. She began sharing details about the day he disappeared, how she'd gone to pick him up from school only to find him already gone, how her world had shattered in an instant. "I never gave up," she said, running her fingers through her son's hair. I put up posters everywhere, drove to different states following leads, kept his story alive on social media. Some people told me to move on, but I couldn't. I knew in my heart he was out there somewhere. The boy looked up at his mother, still holding Max the stuffed dog. She made me change my clothes and cut my hair, he said quietly. But I remembered your butterfly, Mom. I remembered our special song and our Sunday pancakes. I knew she wasn't you. Officer Chen knelt beside them, her professional demeanor softening. Your son is incredibly brave, she said. He kept his wits about him and took action when he saw an opportunity. You should be very proud. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, more officials arrived at the scene. The case was far from over, there would be statements to take, evidence to gather, and a complex investigation to unfold. But for now, in this moment, nothing mattered more than a mother and son reunited, their bond proving stronger than the deception that had tried to break it. The butterfly tattoo caught the sunlight as the mother stroked her son's back, humming softly, a tune that sounded suspiciously like a song about dinosaurs. It was a small gesture, but it represented everything that the imposter had failed to replicate, the genuine, irreplaceable love between a mother and her child. As the morning turned to afternoon, the scene transformed from a street-side reunion to the beginning of a major investigation. Detective Harris had set up a temporary command center in a nearby community center, away from prying eyes and gathering news crews. The boy and his mother sat together in a quiet room, neither willing to let go of the other's hand. Social workers had arrived, along with child psychologists specialized in trauma cases. They watched with professional interest as the boy remained calm and collected, showing remarkable resilience for someone his age. He clutched Max the stuffed dog with one hand while drawing with crayons provided by Officer Chen, sketches that would later prove invaluable to the investigation. Can you tell us about the house where she kept you? Detective Harris asked gently, sitting across from them. The boy's mother squeezed his hand reassuringly as he began to speak. His descriptions were surprisingly detailed: a blue house with white shutters, a creaky third step leading to the front door, and a neighbor's cat that often visited the backyard. There were other rooms upstairs, the boy said, his crayon moving across the paper. She never let me go up there, but sometimes I heard noises. This information caused the detective to exchange significant looks with his colleagues. The woman in custody had maintained her silence, but the boy's testimony might lead them to something bigger. Meanwhile, Officer Richardson was interviewing neighbors from the area where the boy had made his brave escape. One elderly gentleman mentioned seeing the same woman with different children over the past few months. I thought she ran some kind of daycare, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. She always seemed so put together, so normal. Back at the command center, the boy's mother was sharing more details about the past 6 months. She'd created a social media movement, #FindMyButterfly, which had gained thousands of followers. People across the country had shared her story and kept an eye out for her son. She'd appeared on local news stations, plastered posters across multiple states, and never stopped searching. Some days were harder than others, she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. But I kept thinking about our Sunday pancakes, our bedtime songs. I knew if I kept looking, kept his story alive, somehow we'd find each other again. Her son leaned against her, humming their special dinosaur song softly. Officer Chen had been analyzing the woman's confiscated phones. Each device revealed a carefully constructed web of deception, different names, different stories, and concerning communications with unknown parties. The investigation was expanding beyond a single kidnapping case into something much more complex. The boy's drawings had become more detailed throughout the afternoon. He sketched the route they'd taken on various car trips, landmarks he remembered seeing, and even specific stores where they'd stopped. His remarkable memory and attention to detail were providing investigators with crucial leads. She always made me wear a hat when we went out, he explained, drawing a baseball cap in blue crayon. And she told people I was shy if they tried to talk to me. These seemingly small details painted a picture of calculated manipulation that chilled the investigators to their cores. As evening approached, more pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. The blue house with white shutters had been located based on the boys' descriptions. Surveillance teams were already in position, waiting for the right moment to move in. Whatever secrets lay behind that creaky third step and in those mysterious upstairs rooms, they would soon come to light. Detective Harris watched the boy and his mother through the command center's window. Despite the trauma of the past 6 months, their bond had remained unbreakable. The boy's courage in running toward that police car had not only saved himself but was about to unlock a mystery that had baffled law enforcement across multiple states. As night fell, the investigation took a dramatic turn. The blue house with white shutters sat quietly in a suburban neighborhood, its innocent appearance masking dark secrets. Detective Harris coordinated with SWAT teams as they prepared to execute a search warrant. The boys' detailed descriptions had led them here, to this seemingly ordinary house on a quiet street. Back at the command center, the boy had finally dozed off in his mother's arms, still clutching Max the stuffed dog. Officer Chen gently draped a blanket over them both, noting how the mother remained alert despite her exhaustion, as if afraid her son might disappear again if she closed her eyes. "We found something," Officer Richardson's voice crackled over the radio. The search of the house had revealed a sophisticated operation. The upstairs rooms, which the boy had never been allowed to enter, contained dozens of children's belongings, backpacks, clothes, and personal items, each carefully labeled and stored. More disturbing were the detailed files found on a laptop hidden in a false bottom of a dresser drawer. The woman had been keeping records, tracking children across different states. Each file contained photos, schedules, and family information. It was becoming clear that this wasn't just about one child, it was an organized operation that had been running for years. "There are pictures of at least 12 different children here," Officer Richardson reported, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Dating back 3 years." The discovery sent ripples through the command center. Investigators immediately began cross-referencing the information with missing children cases across multiple states. The boy stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about Sunday pancakes. His mother stroked his hair gently, her butterfly tattoo catching the dim light. Detective Harris watched them, thinking about all the other families out there still searching, still hoping for their own reunions. Social media was already buzzing with news of the boy's rescue. The hashtag #FindMyButterfly hashtag had transformed into hashtag #ButterflyFound, with thousands sharing messages of hope and joy. But now, as the investigation deepened, it was becoming clear that this story was far bigger than anyone had initially imagined. Officer Chen's analysis of the confiscated phones had led to more discoveries. There were text messages referring to other operations, coded conversations about transfers and payments. The woman they had in custody wasn't working alone, she was part of a network, carefully organized and methodically executed. "We found a calendar," one of the search team members reported. "Dates circled, locations marked. There are plans for future." He paused, choosing his words carefully, activities. The implications were clear, they had interrupted something that was still very much in motion. The boy's mother, overhearing some of these developments, held her son tighter. "How many other families are out there?" she whispered to Officer Chen. "How many other children?" Her questions hung in the air, heavy with the weight of what was being uncovered. Detective Harris gathered his team for a briefing. The evidence they discovered pointed to a larger trafficking network operating across state lines. The woman's detailed records would be crucial in identifying and locating other victims. But they needed to move carefully, any wrong move could tip off other members of the network. As midnight approached, the command center hummed with activity. FBI agents had arrived, taking jurisdiction over what was now classified as a federal case. The boy's detailed testimony and drawings had cracked open something much larger than a single kidnapping. He had unknowingly helped expose a criminal enterprise that had eluded law enforcement for years. Through it all, the boy slept peacefully in his mother's arms, safe at last. His brave decision to run toward that police car had not only led him back to his mother but was about to help other children find their way home too. The butterfly tattoo on his mother's hand rested protectively over his shoulder, a symbol of hope for all the families still waiting for their own miracles. Dawn broke over the city as the investigation entered its next crucial phase. The FBI had set up an expanded command center, with dozens of agents working through the night to process the mountain of evidence discovered in the Blue House. The boy's mother had finally dozed off, but her arms remained protectively wrapped around her sleeping son. Officer Chen sat at her desk, surrounded by printouts of messages and documents found on the seized devices. A pattern was emerging, one that spoke of a carefully orchestrated operation spanning several years. The woman they had in custody was just one piece of a larger puzzle, playing the role of what they called a handler in the organization. "Look at this," she called to Detective Harris, pointing to her computer screen. The financial records showed regular transfers to offshore accounts, all carefully disguised as legitimate business transactions. The woman had been living a double life, presenting herself as a successful business owner while carrying out her real activities in the shadows. The boy stirred awake, still holding Max the stuffed dog. His mother immediately opened her eyes, as if she had been only half sleeping, ready to respond to any movement from her son. "Can we have pancakes?" he asked sleepily, bringing a tear-filled smile to his mother's face. Even after everything he'd been through, he was still just a child wanting the comfort of familiar routines. Meanwhile, the FBI's child psychology team had been carefully reviewing the boy's testimony and drawings. His detailed observations, which might have seemed simple through a child's eyes, were providing crucial insights into the organization's operations. The creaky third step he'd mentioned? It turned out to be a clever alert system. The neighbor's cat he'd seen in the backyard? Its appearances coincided with regular deliveries of fake documents. "Your son has an incredible memory," one of the FBI agents told the boy's mother. "The details he remembered, things that seemed unimportant to him, are helping us understand how this whole operation works." The mother beamed with pride through her exhaustion, gently squeezing her son's hand. Officer Richardson returned from another sweep of the Blue House, carrying a laptop that tech specialists had finally managed to unlock. The contents were disturbing: detailed profiles of potential targets, surveillance photos of school zones, and communication logs with other members of the network. But most importantly, it contained information about other handlers operating in different cities. The woman in custody had maintained her silence through the night, but the evidence was speaking volumes. Her carefully constructed facade had crumbled, revealing the true nature of her activities. The designer clothes, the well-maintained appearance, the seemingly normal life, it had all been part of a calculated strategy to avoid suspicion. Social workers had arrived with fresh clothes and supplies for the boy and his mother. As the boy changed into clean clothes, he noticed his mother's butterfly tattoo and smiled. "Mom, remember when you got that?" he asked. "You said it was because butterflies are free and always find their way home." His mother pulled him close, fighting back tears at the memory. The investigation was expanding by the hour. FBI agents were coordinating with law enforcement in 3 other states, preparing to execute simultaneous raids. The evidence found in the Blue House had provided them with addresses, names, and operational details they'd been seeking for years. Detective Harris watched as the boy shared a breakfast of pancakes with his mother in the break room. Officer Chen had managed to find chocolate chips to add to the mix, making them as close as possible to their Sunday tradition. It was a small moment of normalcy in the midst of an expanding investigation that would likely make national headlines. Through it all, the boy remained remarkably resilient. He answered questions when asked, drew more pictures to help the investigators, and stayed close to his mother. His brave act of running toward that police car had set in motion events that would not only change his life but potentially save many others. The butterfly effect of his courage was about to ripple through an entire criminal network, bringing hope to families who were still searching for their own missing children. The next 48 hours brought dramatic developments that no one could have predicted. As the sun rose on the second day of the investigation, FBI teams across 3 states moved simultaneously on multiple locations identified through the evidence found in the Blue House. The operation, now dubbed Butterfly Effect, in honor of the tattoo that had helped one brave boy keep hope alive, was the largest of its kind in recent history. In a quiet suburb of Detroit, agents found another house with white shutters. In Minneapolis, they raided a small daycare center that had been operating as a front. And in a peaceful neighborhood in Indianapolis, they surrounded a 2-story home with a perfectly manicured lawn. Each location revealed more pieces of the puzzle, more evidence of the network's extensive operations. Back at the command center, the boy and his mother watched news coverage of the raids on a small break room television. The boy sat on his mother's lap, still holding Max, the stuffed dog that had become his constant companion. Officer Chen had brought them fresh clothes and supplies, helping them maintain a sense of normalcy amid the whirlwind of activity around them. "Mom," the boy said suddenly, pointing at the TV screen. "That's where she took me to get new clothes." He was referring to a small boutique that had just been shown in the news coverage. The seemingly innocent store had been used as a distribution point for fake documentation. His mother held him tighter, amazed at how her son's memory continued to help the investigation. Detective Harris entered the break room with news that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "We found them," he said simply. The raids had led to the rescue of 4 other children who had been missing for various lengths of time. Each child had a similar story, taken by someone who seemed trustworthy, kept in isolation, and forced to pretend they belonged to their captors. The woman who had taken the boy finally broke her silence when confronted with the evidence from all the raids. Her confession revealed a network that had been operating for over 5 years, using sophisticated methods to abduct children and create false identities. The organization had chosen their targets carefully, focusing on children they believed wouldn't be immediately missed or whose disappearances could be explained away. Officer Richardson spent hours coordinating with other police departments, helping to contact the families of the rescued children. Each call brought a mixture of joy and tears as parents learned their long nightmare was finally ending. The boy's mother held his hand as they listened to the happy cries echoing from the detective's office, knowing exactly how those parents felt. "Your son's courage changed everything," Officer Chen told the boy's mother privately. His decision to run, remembering the details he did, it was like pulling a thread that unraveled their whole operation. The mother looked at her butterfly tattoo, remembering how she'd chosen it as a symbol of hope and freedom, never imagining how significant it would become. The FBI's cyber team had made another breakthrough, decoding encrypted files that revealed the full scope of the network's activities. The woman's detailed record-keeping, intended to maintain control over her operation, had become the very evidence that would dismantle it. The files contained years of information that would help prosecutors build an airtight case. As evening approached, more families began arriving at the command center for emotional reunions with their rescued children. The boy watched from his mother's arms as other parents experienced the same joy they had felt just days before. Each reunion brought fresh tears and hugs, with Max the stuffed dog being passed around to comfort other children as they reconnected with their families. The media had dubbed it the butterfly miracle, how one child's bravery and a mother's distinctive tattoo had led to the collapse of a criminal enterprise that had eluded law enforcement for years. But for the boy and his mother, sitting quietly together in the break room sharing another plate of chocolate chip pancakes, it was simply about being together again, about finding their way back to their Sunday traditions and bedtime songs. 1 month after the dramatic events that led to the discovery of the trafficking network, the boy and his mother sat in their familiar kitchen on a Sunday morning. The smell of chocolate chip pancakes filled the air as sunlight streamed through the windows. Life was slowly returning to normal, but things would never be quite the same. They had both been changed by their experience in ways that would leave lasting impressions. The #ButterflyFound movement had evolved into a national advocacy group for missing children. The boy's mother had become an important voice in child safety education, speaking at schools and community centers about the importance of teaching children to recognize and respond to dangerous situations. Her butterfly tattoo had become a symbol of hope for families across the country, with many parents getting similar tattoos in solidarity. Officer Chen had stayed in touch with the family, stopping by occasionally to check on them and to give updates on the case. The boy always greeted her with a big hug, still keeping Max the stuffed dog close by. The toy had become a comfort object for him during therapy sessions, helping him process his experiences in a healthy way. The prosecution has everything they need, Officer Chen explained during one visit, sharing a plate of pancakes with them. Your son's testimony, combined with the evidence we found, has led to multiple indictments. The network is completely dismantled. The boy's mother squeezed her son's hand under the table, proud of his bravery and resilience. Detective Harris had been right, the case had made national headlines. But more importantly, it had led to changes in how law enforcement handled missing children cases. The boy's detailed observations had shown how important even the smallest pieces of information could be. Police departments across the country were updating their protocols, placing greater emphasis on children's testimonies and implementing new training programs. The blue house with white shutters had been seized by authorities and was being converted into a support center for families of missing children. The creaky third step that had once served as a warning system would now creak under the feet of people working tirelessly to reunite families. It was a powerful symbol of how something built for harm could be transformed into a force for good. All the children rescued during Operation Butterfly Effect were making progress in their recovery. Regular support group meetings brought the families together, creating a community of understanding and healing. The boy had formed special friendships with the other children, their shared experiences creating bonds that helped them all move forward. "Remember when you taught me about butterflies, Mom?" the boy asked one morning, watching his mother flip pancakes. "How they have to fight their way out of the cocoon to be strong enough to fly." His mother paused, the spatula hovering above the griddle. "That's what we did, isn't it? We fought our way back to each other." The investigation had led to international attention and cooperation between law enforcement agencies worldwide. The detailed records found in the network had helped identify similar operations in other countries, leading to more rescues and reunions. The butterfly effect of one child's courage had truly rippled across the globe. Officer Richardson had framed the boy's drawings and hung them in the police station's briefing room. They served as a reminder that sometimes the most important breakthroughs come from the most unexpected sources. The simple crayon sketches had become a symbol of hope and persistence for the entire department. As the boy and his mother settled into their new normal, they maintained some changes from their experience. They still sang the dinosaur song every night, but now they added a new verse about bravery and hope. Sunday pancakes remained a sacred tradition, but they always made extra to share with anyone who stopped by, officers, therapy group members, or neighbors who had helped during the search. The butterfly tattoo on his mother's hand had faded slightly over time, but its meaning had only grown stronger. It had become more than just a marking on skin, it was a testament to the unbreakable bond between mother and child, a symbol of hope for those still searching, and a reminder that even in the darkest moments, love and courage can light the way home.